Welcome along, folks, to another question corner. We usually do this about once a month, last Thursday every month. Sometimes we pick a specific topic to talk about, depending on the people who we can gather around. And this one's a DMN special. DMN is a very, very popular topic in general for Camunda folk. And so we decided that we would try and get on an expert. And before I introduce him, let me explain to you all the people that we have joining us. The people we have joining us all have in common that they like walls, except for Niall. I am this one here. I'm Niall Dean. I'm a developer advocate with Camunda, and I sort of host these kind of things and do tutorials and this and that and talk about Camunda stuff. I do not climb, which is why I'm down there in the bottom left. Now, people who do climb, of course, is my usual co-host who'll be joining shortly, which is Nela. She'll be joining in a little while. I'll ask her to introduce herself then. And of course, we have another fabled climber and our expert for the day, which is Philip Osler. Philip, of course, is famous in Camunda for being the one behind the driving force behind DMN within the Camunda both engines. I'll talk about why I say both engines quite frequently in a little while, but he's been building DMN stuff since the DMN specification was released. He is by far the top-notch expert in with DMN and within Camunda and probably in a lot of different places. So Philip, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, hello. I'm Philip. I'm working for Camunda for more than 5 years now. First on the Camunda platform for 2 years. Also was there for working on the DMN engine and implementing, so in the beginning, implementing first stuff and then more with the DRG and DRD. And then now for 2 years, I'm joined the CB project, and that's where I'm currently working on. Niall, you are muted.
We also have Luca, of course, joining. Luca is the person who makes sure that I don't forget stuff and actually does all the organization and is basically our community manager. She takes care of the Camunda community in more fundamental ways than I do. Let's have a quick reminder for those who've not been here before about how this is going to work. You're going to send me some questions over Slido. You can either use your phone to use the phone app there in that website using the QR code. Luca will drop a link to the Slido in the chat for Zoom. We will basically not be using the chat for Zoom for questions. If you do have any, add them through Slido. It's easier for us to take care of those. You can use the Zoom link to tell me that I look nice in my waistcoat or that Philip looks nice in his very old school yellow Camunda icon t-shirt there. Any compliments to anyone else are also perfectly reasonable. The Slido works like this. Once you follow that link, you will have either the ability to enter a question here. The Slido link has been open for about 2 weeks, so there's a whole bunch of questions already there, but if there's one missing, you can drop a question in. You may also want to see a question that you already quite like and upvote it, in which case you can do that. The questions then will be picked by myself and Flip and Nela when she arrives, and we will end up answering them to the best of our abilities. As I said, DMN questions particularly are a good idea with Philip here. Yeah, you can do that. But we were going to start off with a poll. I'm going to stop sharing briefly. On Slido right now, we should be able to see a poll show up. Let me just make sure that actually works by doing, people have already started voting on the poll. That's good. So let me show you what I can see then. I will share my screen again. There we go. So we have, if you go to that Slido link, you should be able to see a poll, which helps us understand a little bit about what people are, what sort of level at which people are actually using DMN. So we have, of course, playing around with DMN for a project, a few people in production, and no one has just heard about DMN. You're a little more advanced than that, and even fewer think that DMN might stand for dangerous mouse snapping or mice napping. It does not stand for dangerous mice napping, unfortunately. We'll have maybe a go at what that might stand for a little later on if one of the questions are relevant for Flip. Cool. So let's get into it then. Everyone ready to go? Let's show the Q&A. Flip, you can see that okay, can't you? Fantastic. I think with the expert who is here, I'm going to let Flip choose his question. And which one would you like to start with, Flip?
We can start with the question why we have two DMN engines.
That is a very good one. Let's find that one. Do you know who exactly asked that one? I think it was Aravind. Okay, I think this is the one, right? As Niall said, you have two DMN engines. I did say that. I hope one's part of ZB. What's the difference in both engines, Camunda and ZB? This is actually a very good story, so I'm going to give it to Flip to describe why we have two DMN engines.
Okay, so we have the Camunda DMN engine, so which was introduced quite some years ago. And it was mainly built with the decision tables in the background. So this was our main focus in the beginning. And my motivation to build another DMN engine was actually that at some point I looked at the DMN TCK. So for DMN, the organization group has a TCK, a technical compatibility kit, to ensure that your DMN engine is doing the right thing according to the spec. And I run all the test cases to the Camunda DMN engine and try to tweak it as much as possible, also using my new feel engine for this. And I reached a point there the Camunda DMN engine can't make progress because it requires other DMN elements, which was not supported. So other than tables and literal expressions were a bit more. And I tried to tweak the Camunda DMN engine to its limits. But at some point I realized it has its limit because it's based on decision tables in the background, and there are limits, and you can interact with the feel engine. And that's why I built a new one to optimize for other cases and also in the integration with the feel engine. And that's the reason why we have two. So Camunda and ZB, say what to this is, in ZB, we don't have a DMN engine built in for this. You can plug one in. We have workers. You can plug the Camunda DMN engine just as a worker for ZB, so it can also then execute decisions, but it's nothing you can build in. But if eventually we will support DMN officially for ZB, it will be then the same DMN engine as for Camunda.
Cool, thanks a lot, Flip. I will consider that answered. I will take the next one, which I find is slightly related, and this is how does the DMN engine fit into the overall architecture of Camunda and where it's situated. That is relevant because it is different depending on ZB, and actually the way its architecture works means that ZB can use it as a service in a very easy way. So right now the DMN engine is, if you were using Camunda at all, the DMN engine is already probably part of that. It's deployed inside that. The DMN engine is just an additional part of the Camunda engine, essentially. They're very closely linked, although the DMN engine can be deployed independently as a standalone service. And a lot of people do this. So the DMN engine can actually be deployed as a standalone artifact that you can use as a service, because it's actually more or less, it's kind of stateless in a way, in that you can start it in memory in a HTTP database and just feed it tables and then just query it without needing too much of an infrastructure to use it. And so we do have customers who do that. We have actually got at least two that I know of who are using Camunda purely for DMN, just the engine itself. They don't use any BPMN whatsoever. They just use the DMN engine. They have it hosted somewhere, and then they just query it from other systems to run checks. So it's actually, but it's also embedded in the engine. So later on, we might have some questions, I think, about the role of DMN with BPMN. And with that regard, the fact that the engine is so closely linked to the Camunda BPM engine makes it really easy to link those two different systems, and also give you much more power with regard to using your DMN tables as part of a process. So hopefully that is answered. Do vote questions if you do have them. I just grabbed that one because it was relevant. But if you guys have any more ones you'd like to see, use your power of voting. There's an election next week, so you can practice your voting skills right now if you want on questions. Obviously, I can't vote in that foreign election. Flip, is there a question that you've seen there that you'd like to answer?
You can just pick the next one, the upvoted one,
Sure.
BPMN and DMN.
Sure.
So
this, yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, go ahead.
it's kind of easy to answer. So the benefits for DMN for BPMN then is that you can extract logic just out of it. So typical use cases that in your BPMN model, it can lead to you have need to make decisions, and then you're using exclusive gateways for this, and this can be a bit messy if this is a more complex decision. So you have either one exclusive gateway with many outgoing sequence flows, which then lead to an unreadable model in the end, or you have then chained exclusive gateways. So both of them we sort quite often, and DMN is nicely fit into this problem because you can just extract the whole logic, which you have then on the conditions of all the sequence flows, and put them into your decision table in the easiest place or a bit more complex. And there you can have all the decision logic, which is to just one result, which can then be used in the process. So on the other side is also that you can extract the business logic, so for the rules which you usually would implement in script tasks or in your service tasks. So you don't need to code the logic in a Java program or any script language you have. You can then extract these and model them into decisions using the DMN.
Cool, thanks, Phil. That's very, very true. There's loads, I mean, from my experience as well, just to add to that question, the ability to trigger DMN tables based on BPMN events or a series of possible sequences that need to happen is kind of important to combine the two of them. Is also like a nice versioning mechanism that comes with using BPMN and DMN together, being that you might have a scenario in which, depending on a series of states or a series of variables, you might want to call a specific table based on the current context. And that's much easier with BPMN because then you can just dynamically call the DMN table within a call activity. Within a business rules task, without needing to worry too much about the end user making that call to the DMN table. It's a nice way of self-containing those. And also, of course, just the ability to be able to put user interfaces around DMN, even that really simple thing is really good with BPMN. So yeah, they're usually used in combination. They're kind of made for each other, really. Cool, so I will click OK on that one. Let's see, what's the next popular one? I was going to go for a super easy one because it's a quick one to answer, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is where a DMN file saves in database, which tables? This is a quick question for you, Flip. Do you remember which tables store the DMN tables?
So for the DMN files itself, it's the same as the other BPMN files. So all of these is in the deployment table and then in the additional resources. So everything's just as binary.
Exactly, yeah. So the DMN files are stored in the database, which is actually an important thing to remember, because I think people, when they start to think about deploying to the engine, it can often be misunderstood that actually the BPMN file or the DMN file lies beside the engine on the node that you deploy to. But that isn't the case. If you deploy a DMN table to the engine, it actually goes straight to the database. That's important for scaling reasons. It means you can have multiple engines, and then you can all, depending on whichever one you make the call to, it doesn't matter. They all know the same DMN files because they're all stored in the database. It's actually an important thing to know that the database is where we store the DMN files. Welcome along, Naila. You made it. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, hello. Just jumped in.
I introduced you earlier. I'm sure people recognize you from various question corners as well as the KamundaCon talk you did a little while ago. I'm going to ask Flip if he wants to answer a question, and then I'm going to throw it to you, Naila. So pick a question you might want to answer. So I'll give you time to read them, though. Philip, is there anything there you'd like to look through?
We can talk about the first question here from Rob.
Yep.
If he's there, we can also get a bit deeper into this. No, it seems not. So for the champion and challenger strategies, how to model them in DMN. This is an interesting question. I don't have any practical experience in this, because this is I'm not a financial expert in this, and I don't know this with that. But as far as I understand, this is about that you have different rule sets. So you have a decision, but you don't know which of these business rules will result in the best result. Will fit. So which has the best outcome. So I have different approaches. So you want to choose the approach which fits best. And so one idea of modeling this could be that you have these all different paths you want to challenge each other, model into separate DMN decisions, can be different tables, and then you need to combine these all together, and then you can rank these and then return the one which is matched. So I can also share my screen because this is kind of related to a blog post.
Go ahead, I'll stop sharing mine. Go ahead.
So as an example, how this may look like, a time ago, I wrote a blog post here, which also talking about DRD and a bit more stuff you can do. Here in this example, unfortunately, it's missing the DRD. But basically, it's about also scoring in a sense that you want to look for something best, and you have different inputs. And in the end, you collect a list of options, and then you want to combine the result and take the best one. So to combine the results, this can be done, for example, in DMN, it would be a context and just collect all the stuff. And to score them, you can here see like a sort function, sort on a particular property then on the rank of the outcome, and then you can just return this best result of it. So this could be an option to model these things. So at best, just look at the blog post and ask more particular questions or with examples, and just as the first introduction here.
Cool, thanks, Phil. I will go back to sharing the questions. Neil, have you picked a question yet, or shall I continue?
Well, I saw that there are actually a lot of DMN questions, which I'm not the person to answer because there's Philip here, luckily. That's why I invited him. I just saw one, and maybe we can try to get this together quickly. It's about a restartable sub-process. I assign initial reviewers that feed into a multi-instance sub-process need ability to change reviewers. So maybe if I understand this correct, you want a reusable sub-process. That means we need a call activity here in this case. Maybe I can share my modeler if you allow me.
Lots of you can go ahead. So yeah, we're going to have a brief break from DMN to watch Neil do some modeling.
So the case would be here that I have the call activity. That's a sub-process, I mean, and that would be restartable from various processes now. So I call it, that's your sub-process, or I call it that's process A, basically. And I assign initial reviewer that feed into a multi-instance sub-process. Okay, that's interesting. So this one is also multi-instance wise. I hope I understand this correctly. So I have a multi-instance here. And I originally assign one, and then I understand the following, that I want like to change the reviewer inside my sub-process. Now, do I understand it correct, or do
that sounds right to me?
Yeah, that understands. Okay, perfect. What I can do is inside the sub-process then, or what I would do is basically I would start working with listeners. Basically, I think I would use listeners for the reviewer. If I have an initial reviewer, that the reviewer, I hope it's a user task, because that just would make sense that you want to change that person. What I would do is then inside here, maybe you can work with listeners. And when this user task is created with a task listener, you go here for create. You could maybe provide some code snippets here that could assign the user dynamically. that's how I would solve it from what I understand now. Niall, do you like to add something, or do you have another idea?
No, that's
Sometimes there are
pretty
more
good.
ideas.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I think I would, because I love event subprocesses, I would stick an event subprocess in there, and then that way you could actually trigger the reassignment based on some external event. So I always talk about this symbol as my favorite. It really, really is. Neil is doing right now. But basically this means that this event subprocess is waiting for a message that could be sent from any external source. And when that happens, it can then automatically do this thing. Why it's really important is because this can happen in parallel to whatever's going on in your process, as well as that not interfere with what's actually happening with the process. So this way you could actually say, well, now we've just, by dropping these three symbols, which is Neil has an event subprocess with a non-interrupting message start event and a task, we now have the ability to trigger something immediately when we need it without needing to worry about what's going on. It's an absolutely fantastic symbol. And this way people could actually reassign things programmatically just by messaging the engine and saying, here is the new assignee, and the engine does the rest of the work. It's actually really handy. So yeah, thanks, Neela. I will take back the screen from you. Hope you don't mind, stealing as I am. Let's see, there we go. Okay, so that's that one. Philip, have you found another DMN question you'd like to help out with?
Yeah, I would like to take the one from Warp regarding customer day of birth.
Which one, sorry?
From Warp, it was about customers calculating day of birth.
Oh, sure, yeah. Man, Rob asked a lot of questions. You can continue. You can go ahead and answer it. I'll just try and find it.
Okay, so the question was, how can DMN help you to dealing with rules that include the age of the person? So usually you have decisions you need to say, okay, what's the age of the person? And if it's younger than 16, 18, 21, you need to do different things. So there's a common task you often do. And DMN can help you here quite easily. Also can share something in a table, Niall?
Certainly, yeah, I'll stop hearing. Go ahead.
So for example, so assuming I have a decision table like this here, so I have a customer age, I have age, and I have an outcome, something like this, like a rank. And I assuming I have decisions like this. So I want to react on the age of the customer. So, but now the question is, how can I calculate this age? This is usually you need kind of so the current year and then the year of the customer, need to combine these together. And you can put this all together in a nicely field expression, which is then friendly enough, hopefully. So yeah, this expression here is feel, which calculates the age of the customers. So you have the birthday of the customer. So it's just a date. And then you have the today function, which in the engine is pretty new, which returns the actually date. And you're using the built-in field function, years and month duration, to calculate the duration between these two dates. And then taking the year's properties out of it. So in the end, you calculate the difference between the two dates and then getting the age out of it. In the end, you have a nice DMN table, which just contains the ages.
Nice idea. And that's actually very handy. Out of interest, Philip, do you actually have any sort of, this isn't a question there, especially as it popped into my head because I didn't realize that myself. Do you have any sort of these best practices or hints that you keep anywhere? Have you written anything that you use for these kinds of useful tidbits?
A few of them, not much yet. So in the documentation of the Feel engine itself, it's also linked from the community documentation, you come through it, and there's an example section and containing a few examples of typical use cases you can use it for. So here's some date time calculation, some filtering of lists and accessing index. There's also some validation example, which also used by some of our community members. and also something like this for calculating birthdays over a list of customers and picking the
Nice.
age. So
Good to know.
I will extend it as new requests come in, and I'll take it.
So you hear that, folks? If you have anything you would like Philip to build for you, he has just admitted that he will do it for you. So easy. You will regret that sentence, Philip. Okay, so we will move along. We've got enough time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions. Let's, I was going to pick one. Oh, this is interesting. Rob Parker has asked, this is a roadmap question, so I might just answer this one about Optimize, which Rob asks, I would like Optimize to recognize and treat DRDs as a whole rather than distinct decision tables. Is this on the Optimize roadmap? So I'm glad that Rob Parker, of course, is relatively well known in the community, and he's a big user of DMN. So this makes sense that he would ask about this. But Optimize is our reporting tool that people tend to use along with the BPMN. It also does some DRD and DMN stuff. Not very much at the moment. I would expect that Optimize is going to do a pretty big push with DMN in the coming quarters with new features around DMN. Definitely in Optimize, a lot of people are asking for it. It's very nice that Rob asked this because, and while I can't answer this exact question, one thing I can say is that the fact Rob asked this question will mean that I will bring this up with the product managers themselves, who are always looking for real use cases for how people want to have reports designed in the modeler. So, or it's designed in Optimize, especially around DMN. They don't really have a lot of data around there. So if you would like that sort of thing, pop in the forum and maybe start a thread there where people can drop the kinds of things they would see in Optimize for DMN. For me, I can say that DRGs and DRDs are probably be considered as an important point. How that will work UX wise, I don't really know. I would have to ask Aja, our UX expert, to understand exactly how that might look. But it'll definitely be on the roadmap now that I know it should be in roadmap for discussion at the very least. Cool. So Neela, is there anything you'd like to answer there, or should I throw to Philip again?
Well, I'm not sure. Maybe we can. It's something about the engine performance from Finur. I have to say I'm a big Camunda fan. I'm a long time in the company, but I really don't remember the blog post from 2016, the 8. I have no idea what's written there. I really would like to give you an idea for the engine performance style. Can you remember the blog post?
I actually do remember that blog post.
You do? Wow, okay.
So that blog post is written by Philip, actually.
Okay.
And actually, it was one of the first performance tests we did with the DMN engine. And I remember because it was quite an impressive series. While Philip maybe talks about that, I'm going to try and find the blog post on my other screen.
Sorry, Philip, I throw it back to you. I was not aware. It says engine performance. I was not aware that this is also a specific DMN question here.
No problem. I can say, so the blog post was just examples, but in the blog post, there is actually the link to the repository of the benchmark. So the idea is that you can just take the benchmark and fill in your custom data, your custom DMN that you have, and can run the benchmark yourself. So these are containing just an example, but it's open and you can just extend it and run it yourself to get the actual numbers you're looking for.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm actually going to put this link in the chat. People are always asking about performance testing DMN. And is this blog post still relevant, do you think, Philip? Or do you think it needs to be updated, or if there's anything they need to know about it?
About the concrete numbers, I'm not sure about. I would just recommend to run it on your machine and get the numbers with your examples best.
Yeah, cool. So if somebody goes ahead and uses that is a library that exists for testing. So maybe create an issue, maybe create a pull request if something doesn't quite work. But I do remember running that about 5 years ago, and it does work really well. You can test your own DMN tables for performance. And while the 2 inputs are just an example, it's built to be able to take whatever model you have and test that. So that's important to know as well. Cool, thanks for that. Maybe we should create a new performance thing at the Hack Days or something, Phil. Maybe it's worth it. Maybe we can use ZB or something to try and increase that. Cool. So let's take a look. We haven't had any DRG questions really answered. Philip, do you feel like taking on one of those?
Sure.
So this one, how internally DRG is transformed and executed in combination with expressions and the DMN tables. This is a big question, and how the execution chain managed in DRGs. So do you want to quickly explain what DRGs are in terms of, for people that might only know DMN from the tables?
Sure. Let me share my screen, then I can maybe show an example.
Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, then I look in. So a DRD. A DRD, I think this is a public example. You remember this is from the Camunda example. It's getting started DMN, and so this is a DRD. So it's basically a group of decisions which are usually connected to each other. So here we have the dish and the beverage, and the other connection here you see with the arrow. That means the beverage decision has a required decision, and the required decision is the dish. That means the dish decision must be evaluated before the beverage because it depends on its inputs. So if you look into it, here in decision you see there's one input, say dish, and here's another input. So if you look into the DRD again, so here the dish decision take other inputs, and then in the output it returns a dish, and this output is then used in the decision, which is so in the beverage decision. So for the DMN engine, which means that when you evaluate a decision, it will look for the required decisions and will evaluate these required decisions first, and then feed these results into the decision then you want to evaluate. So this is how the DMN engine will then chain the decision and the evaluation of it. And in the end, it will just returns the result of the decision you called, because on the required decisions is just for feeding the other decisions.
Yeah, it's a really important way to make your individual tables less complex. I think before we implemented DRDs, we were having huge big tables that were just one big, like they should have been DRDs. And then what ended up happening was when the DRDs came in, they're actually a way of independently separating your logic into more manageable dependent places. One thing I remember people get confused about a lot, Philip, is can you explain the versioning mechanism between DRDs and tables? Because a DRD model basically might have 3 tables in it. So are those tables individually versioned inside the DRD, or is the DRD itself versioned, or how does that whole thing work? Can you explain that?
Okay, a bit more complicated question. But they are versioned individually, and the DRD itself is also versioned. Why is this so? Because you can call the decisions on its own. So you have the DRD, you see it with the 2 decisions which are related to each other. So you can, but either with the DRD, you can also evaluate the decisions individually. So you can just evaluate the dish decision, but you can also evaluate the beverage, which then includes also the dish decision. So there's different ways. So because of this, you can evaluate separately. You need to version them also separately. However, if you will evaluate a decision which is in a DRD and has a required decision, it will use the decision which is on the same version of the DRD. So it will not then use the latest version of the decision from the DRD, but it will really from this model to ensure that it's using the right data model and not something else which changed in the newer version.
That's good to know. Yeah, that's I remember that being confusing me initially when it was recently set up. Super, thanks a lot, Flip. So we are going to move on to some more. We're going to close now, I think, because that's about all the questions we have time for. But before we do, people may have noticed I've created a poll that you can answer a poll, a little question, trying to suggest to us what DMN should stand for rather than what it actually does. If you go to Slido, you can answer those, and you can start answering those while we go through the last couple of slides, which I will show you now. Let's see. Haha, we actually have slides are there. Are they full screen? No one knows for sure. Let me share my screen so people can see what I can see. That's a nice idea. Okay, so welcome along to this event. Who would have thought there were more events coming up? So this event, of course, happens every month, last Thursday. We may not do it we may not do it on Christmas though, so just be aware of that. So if you have your Christmas plans to share it with us, asking questions about Camunda, you may be disappointed. I hope none of you are going to be too disappointed. But other events coming up, we have a whole bunch of virtual meetups happening. These are more, this is a very casual sort of thing. So if you're interested in seeing specific talks from community members, these are community-led meetup groups. You can see they're here. Luca, do you want to describe these for me?
Yeah, so all around the world, we have awesome meetup organizers. So this is not organized by us, but it's all about Camunda. And yes, you should definitely join one of those meetups if you, as Naya said, if you want to hear community presentations or sometimes also Camunda presentations, and it's always a lot of fun. But of course, at the moment, everything is online, so you can actually join all of them if you want to.
And if you want to practice your German, you can join the virtual meetup on December 1st. I will be there to try and practice my German. But that's not all. Luca, do you want to discuss these events as well?
Yeah, so on November 12th, we have our next process automation forum. This time it's focused on telecommunication. And of course, we have a lot of interesting webinars coming up all around RPA. So you should definitely join November 3rd or November 19th. And as Naya said, every last Thursday of the month, we have our Camunda Question Corner. So the next one will take place on November 26th.
Well, thank you so much. So that'll be the last one of the year, probably. So let's take a look at what potential DMN options we have. We have digital marketing nomads, not bad. Direct message notification, I guess. Donkey making noodles, that is my current favorite. I think donkey making noodles is pretty quality. Dummy mode night. Drink Milky Nightly, which is a very weird thing to say. Don't mess with Nile. There we go. There's one that I like. I can get behind that one. Yeah, that is a distributed module nod. Cool. Thanks for that, guys. That was actually a little better than I even thought it was going to be. Super. So we shall end there. Thanks a lot for joining, everybody. I hope your DMN questions were answered. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to join the forum and answer them there, or you might find your answers there. So thanks a lot for spending some time with us. I hope, yeah, it was fun. Thanks, Neela, of course, for dropping in when she could. She was very busy today. Thanks, of course, Philip, for doing all the heavy lifting of actually answering the questions. That was very useful. And of course, Luca, for organizing and promoting the event itself. Thank you, all you lovely people, for showing up. I hope to see you again soon. Joy and pleasure as always. Yeah, see you. Cheerio. Bye-bye.